Society Foundation in UK, ETI nowadays. He worked with the TUC, with Unite, with Unison. We were trying to do some work with ITF as well, and many other organizations. He's worked very closely with Dutch trade unions, German trade unions, Danish trade unions. I think the Danish are strongest in trade union-wise in Western world nowadays. So I always salute the people who live in a very hot waters in Pakistan and carry on working in the most difficult circumstances. He's one of those brave people who lived there, worked for people, and still working for it. He established Pilar with Nabi Ahmed, who was another old god of trade union in Pakistan, and he's still running Pilar. But recently, the biggest achievement of the Pilar was to get the compensation for Baldia town fire when 250 people died in Karachi. So let's stop here, otherwise it will take a whole evening to introduce Karamat Ali. So Karamat Ali situation. Karamat Ali.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, all of you, for being here. It's really a privilege to be meeting with friends at the same place and share some thoughts. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll just give you a kind of an overview of the labor and trade union situation, and then a few remarks about democracy and the current situation in Pakistan, and then maybe we should have a kind of a conversation and share views, because these are important issues for me, but for everyone who is concerned about Pakistan and its future. So, as far as the trade union situation is concerned, it is, I think, the worst time ever in Pakistan as far as trade unions are concerned. Just to give you an idea, we have a labor force of about 65 million, and right now we only have about 500,000 workers organized with the trade union. So this is like less than 1%. So you can't really do better than that and become zero. But this is what we have. And trade union in Pakistan, it used to be around the same lines that you have trade union in the UK, because we were a British colony, and we started industrializing and then unionization under the British. But you might find it very strange that we had better labor laws and more rights for workers under the British, and than we have now. We have one of the best laws relating to right of association, which was formulated in 1926. In 1926, we did not have a representative parliament in India, but this was a imperial legislative council. And that council passed this law, which was actually much better than the ILO Convention on Right of Association, Convention 87, which was enacted 22 years after the Indian law. The highlight of that law was that everybody's right of association was recognized, whether they were in the state service, in the public sector, private sector, any sector of economic activity. Everybody could form union of their own choice, except one category of employees, which was the uniformed personnel of the armed forces. Because armed forces also have a large number of people working who are not uniformed. They do civilian and technical work, so they are not uniformed people, and they have their unions. And it may be of interest for you that this law was almost single-handedly pushed and successfully enacted by one individual, whose name was Barrister Muhammad Ali Jinnah. he was a trade unionist. He was president of the All India Postal Staff Union in 1925. And in that capacity, he got elected to the Imperial Legislative Council and he got this law passed. So we had 3 or 4 very, very good legislations which dealt with health and safety, like the Factories Act of 1934. We had a special law for mine workers because mining was a big sector at that time. So there was this Mines Act of 1923. And then finally we had an Industrial Disputes Act which was enacted in 1947, just before the British left. So this provided a framework which was really very, very pro-labor rights and recognized rights for the broadest possible sections of the working people. The result was that in 1951, the level of unionization amongst industrial workers was over 25%, because those laws allowed unions, industry-based unions, sectoral workers could form any kind of union. There was no compulsory registration under that law, but it was optional. You could go and register with the registrar of trade union, but you didn't have to. And there was no interference in the trade unions from any state institution or from the employers. Now that situation changed dramatically after the imposition of the first martial law in Pakistan, which was imposed by General Ayub Khan in 1958. So the first act of the martial law regime was to repeal the 1926 Trade Union Act. And for many years there was no law relating to the right of association. So workers were asked to form local factory committees, and that allowed a very limited kind of collective bargaining possibility to the worker. So that martial law continued till 1962 when Ayub Khan civilianized his regime and he tried to bring in a law which was extremely limiting. So for the next 8-9 years, we didn't have any serious industrial relations law or the possibility of unionization. Finally, there was a big sort of movement against the Ayub Khan dictatorship, and we as students were part of that movement. And that was a very successful movement. And finally, Ayub Khan had to resign. So, but he did not hand over power to the Speaker of the Parliament, which existed at that time, which he should have done, under the constitution that he himself gave, which was very arbitrarily limiting the constitution. But he handed it over to the then Commander-in-Chief of Pakistan's army, General Yahya Khan. So we entered the second martial law. And that martial law enacted a law which prevails even today. It was known as the Industrial Relations Ordinance, and it kind of legislated a long-term division and permanent divide amongst the workers. Under that law, we could not form unions of our own choice, but we could only form unions that were allowed by that law, which were enterprise-level unions. So you could form a union in just one enterprise, but it also allowed multiplicity of unions in each enterprise. So, and that was touted as a step for democratization of the labor movement. But in fact, it was a permanent divide amongst the workers' union. So just to give you the current situation, as I said, of the 65 million labor force, and the ILO had reviewed these laws back in 1986, and their finding was that Pakistan's laws relating to association and administration of unions explicitly exclude 75% of the labor force. There's a long list of exclusions. And for the remaining 25%, according to that report, only 10% would have free access to exercise their right of association, because the rules are made after the law is enacted. The rules excluded another 15% through various manipulations. So now the result is that we have at this moment, according to this latest publication from, this is a publication funded by the ILO and done by the registrar of something called the National Industrial Relations Commission. In my view, these figures are quite exaggerated, but you will still get an idea. Now there are 7,096 registered trade unions in Pakistan with a membership of, according to this study, 1.4 million. So again, out of 65, they are showing 1.4. My own guess is because the state has stopped publication of statistics about unions and workers. So even if you take this 4 million, it will be not more than 3% of the labor force. But these 7,996 unions are not in 700 or 7,000 workplaces. There are only 1,390 collective bargaining agent unions, which means all these unions actually exist in these 1,390 enterprises. And if you look at the number of enterprises, industrial, commercial, because the laws totally exclude workers in the agriculture sector. So we have something like 450,000 to 500,000 small, big enterprises, but the collective bargaining takes place only in 1,309. So I think you get a fair idea of the labor movement, and then of course, this labor movement is further divided. I mean, all these unions are either independent unions or they are part of some 100+ trade union federations. And they are divided along various lines, including religious. It would not stop the formation of unions, they will not let them be effective. So these divides were created. And as you know, Pakistan has been a frontline state against communism from the very beginning. Just to give you an idea, when Pakistan was created, so Clement Attlee was the Prime Minister of Britain. He defeated Churchill soon after the war, and he was interviewed by a journalist about what was happening to stop the onward march of the Soviet communism into the Indian subcontinent. And he was very blunt, and he said, well, with the creation of Pakistan, we have made sure that this godless ideology will not be able to spread to any part of India. So we have made an arrangement for that. And our rulers there, I think they were so loyal to Mr. Attlee that they did everything that they could do to prove them right. So, and they have been struggling for that objective all through. So we are, in a sense, if you might find it strange that we would have been better off if we had continued to remain the colony of Britain than where we are right now. So this situation gives you an idea in a country where, when Pakistan was being discussed, so the same barrister Muhammad Ali had reduced the ownership ceiling to 150 acres of irrigated land and 300 acres of non-irrigated land. So that would have rationalized the land ownership and would have laid the basis for indigenous industrialization that you need. You need a bigger kind of internal market for further industrialization. Both the things are lacking, and that is why we have what we have today. The huge kind of balance of payments problems. So governments are going with the begging or whoever can give some grant. And we don't have anything really serious to offer in return to anybody. So we are in that situation because of these various factors. And just to give you an idea of what is the conditions of the ordinary people, if you look at the level of which will be how many pounds?
100. Less than 100.
Less than 100 pounds. But the
Per month?
Sorry?
So per month?
Per month.
Per month. But the World Bank report on Pakistan for the last year tells us that 83% households in Pakistan have an income of less than $2 a day, which means less than $2 a day means they don't even get 50% of this meager minimum wage, statutory minimum wage. So that can give you an idea. We have 72% of Pakistan's children now are malnourished according to UNICEF. We have, the total population of what is now Pakistan in 1947 was close to 30 million, right? We now have 25 million children of age 5 plus who are out of school. And as I said, 72% are malnourished. So you can imagine what kind of labor force are we expecting in the next 10 years, what can happen to Pakistan's economy. The only thing that grows is our spending on our defense, and people become more and more defenseless. Malnourished people cannot defend themselves. Illiterate people cannot defend themselves in this day and age, but that number is increasing tremendously. And there is, although we now have a constitutional right under Article 25A, which says all children aged 5 to 16 have the right to free compulsory education. And we brought in this amendment to the Constitution in 2010. We have less than half of this number out of school then, and after we have created this right, the number have doubled. And it is likely to further double in 5 years' time. So I think I'll stop here. This is the kind of situation in which trade union is. As I said, after 1% you only become 0%. And so there is no immediate possibility of pushing for strong labor movement, and therefore, in my view, no real possibility for initiating a democratic movement which will take into account all these problems. And I think we can share thoughts on this. I don't think I need to say more.
Thank you very much. I think very true picture of Pakistan today. I think most of us know the history of Pakistan. Pakistan was a liberal, progressive, tolerant society in 40s, 50s and 60s. And from 70s it started to become intolerance, and today we are so intolerant that we don't even allow somebody to overtake us if we are driving the car. We kill people because he or she has overtaken it. I know we will be opening up in a minute. We have been joined by Muhammad Sajjad Bhatt, who is educationist, but also work with World Solidarity. Talat Gill, who is a writer, poet, and a short story writer. And the gentleman, I ask your name if you don't know.
Shahid Nadeem.
Shahid
Nadeem.
Oh my God, it is a very famous name, not a Doka theatre. But before...
Shahid is a lawyer.
Okay. Shahid Azim is always my good friend because I know the Joka one. We visited. Before I open it up to anybody who want to comment, I want to ask Sandra Secretary, who has visited many times Pakistan, and as you heard, she is not only the founder member of Third World Solidarity, but also trade unionist here. And she has met many trade union activists in Pakistan when she visited many times during the Musharraf period and afterward. Sandra Secretary.
Oh, well, what can I say? I was appalled to hear about the situation of trade unionists in Pakistan during my many visits, and I hadn't realized that it was 1% of the 65 million working population. I'm quite staggered by that statistic, and I have many questions come to mind, but I was very fortunate. The first trip that I went to Pakistan on, it was a human rights trip, and I was mentioning earlier, we were chatting about the fact that we were sponsored by Benazir Bhutto. We were completely neutral in terms of party affiliations when we went, but we visited a lot of people who lived in mud houses with dirt floors. We visited palaces. We interviewed a lot of people who had been tortured, and we indeed were shown the torture, physical manifestations on their persons, which was quite shocking. On our return, we briefed Amnesty and also the Foreign Office. But I gained a great insight on that first trip to Pakistan. What I did learn, that always stay with me, is that despite this, forgive me, one perhaps shouldn't say this, but I just find that it's almost off the grid as a country when it comes to democracy and what's happening there with human rights. But clearly we have institutes like Hyler, and we have so many intellectuals that are trade unionists, that are fighters, that are out there trying to change the system. So I'm really encouraged by what I've heard today, even though it's a very grim picture. But the many times that I went to Pakistan, I'd just like to say I met a range of people, and I found the heart and the spirit of the Pakistanis extraordinary. Their generosity, no matter what level of the hierarchy they sat upon or were in, from the poorest people to the privileged. I subsequently made other trips to Pakistan. For example, I'm involved with a charity called Jockade, which was founded by Mushtaq Lasharie, and it's in near Tubtek in Jang province, and it's for children, disabled children, mainly girls. That's given me insights as well into the country about what happens in the education system. This is supposed to, constitutionally, between the age 5 and 16, every child is supposed to have access to education. Ha. And what about the disabled kids? They are at the bottom of the scrap heap. I've traveled all over Pakistan, it has to be said, even into Kashmir, but not very far. I'm privileged in that respect, from north to south and east-west, though I have not been to Baluchistan, though I've met many Baluch leaders, and we've had meetings for the Baluch with all-party parliamentary group here in Britain through Mushtaq organizing those particular meetings. But I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming. I feel highly privileged to see you. We've met before, but a long time ago, and I think it's grand that you can come and espouse the virtues of Pakistan despite this gloomy picture, because there's hope in what you have to say, I feel. So I think really that's all I have to say, but I'm a founder member of Third World Solidarity, and I'm a trade unionist and an activist, and so this is a perfect person to speak for Third World Solidarity and all party parliament. Parliamentary
Thank you
Group.
very much, Sandra. Thank you. We are doing a small fundraising in around 15th of December. Anybody who is interested, we will be asking you to come in South Hall in TKC at 7 o'clock for 7:30. And we work with most vulnerable children, the children who are killed by their own parents. And if you want to know more about it, come to that dinner, who are born, especially female girls, in the villages with poor families, and they are disabled mentally. Nobody knows, because in the villages there is no doctor, no facility. When they grow up and become 4 or 5 years of age, they isolate them and kill them, virtually starve them to death. So sorry about this introduction, but you mentioned it and
Yes.
I wanted to. But I have a question. When Karamat Sahab told me last time that out of 65 million working people in Pakistan, there is less than 1%. I went and I was invited by Islamabad Press Club, oldies, and they were sitting there and they challenged me. They said, no, it cannot happen, because 65 million means almost half of the adult population of Pakistan. And they said, how can you have a 50% working people in Pakistan? Can you explain it? How can we, means I was unable to answer it. That was questioned by a very learned journalist from Dawn newspaper. He's a young man, I think we all know him, but he's written quite a lot on Pilar as well. But he said it cannot happen that there are 65 million people working in Pakistan, because there is only one person working in whole family. Sometimes, yes, that was his question, and he challenged again and again. And I said, look, this is a ILO figure, which I was quoting the book, Karamat Sahab. Can you say what is the source?
It's not half the population. The population of Pakistan, according to the last census, is shown at about 220 million, and which is actually again, I think it's not sort of a proper sort of picture of the population growth in Pakistan. At least there is a deficit of 30 million there. According to, like the way we have had the natural growth and the migration and everything, people who are working on demography, and the census results have been very severely criticized for whatever reason they have done, because there was some problem of power sharing between provinces. So actually we skipped the whole census, it's a decennial kind of exercise. We did not have any census after 81 till 1998. For 17 years we did not conduct a census. And after that we have done it now. We have underreported on it. So the minimum that is, it would be 230 million. So it's about 1/3 of the population. And that is the general labor participation rate in Pakistan has always hovered around between 25 to 29, 30%. And that is the rate for almost all developing countries. So it's like about 29 to 30%. So the figure of 65 million is the correct figure. It's not under or overstating.
Thank you. Any comment or questions?
Yeah, with the people who are documented by the government of Pakistan that they are working, because there are many people who are working like on the daily wages, they are not registered with their tax or anything. So your figure, does it, maybe the difference which you mentioned 1% or 65 million, maybe due to this, their figure include those people who are not registered for the tax purpose. So can you explain a little bit about it?
No, these are not my figures.
Yeah.
These are the figures given on labor force by the government of Pakistan. Now the thing is that the government of Pakistan gave these figures to the ILO study person. They have stopped publishing proper figures on labor. There used to be 20 different publications from the colonial time. We have ceased publication of all those because they just don't want to share information. So you can make your own guesses. But this was given by the government. So I have no reason to challenge that. But the point you are raising is quite valid, just to give you in terms of documentation. This factory which caught fire, and Lasharie Sahab just mentioned that, it had labor force of about 1,600 workers. Only 300 were registered with the Employee Social Security Institution, which meant what percentage? It's less than 20%. And that is the